Hi, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know it's a little late, but let's talk about all the books that I read during the month of April. So I actually did a lot of vlogging in the month of April. So if you are interested, feel free to go watch my last new releases vlog where I talked about a few of these books, or go watch my magical readathon vlog where I talked about a lot of these books. If you're not interested in watching any of those vlogs, that's fine. I'll still talk about them here. But if you wanted more in-depth discussions and more thoughts about any of these books, feel free to go watch those. But we're just gonna start and talk about these in the order in which I read them. Nothing fancy. Starting with the first book that I finished in the month of April, I read A Rather Vengeful Accord by Danielle Knight. I am actually really shocked about how fondly I think about this book because I had a really rough experience reading this. I gave this 3.5 stars, but the beginning was not good. One of the roughest starts to a fantasy I've read in quite some time. I've read a lot of fantasy books, sci-fi books. I'm not new to like world building and like introducing yourself to a fantasy world. This was just not very great. The first 50 pages were rough. I had to read the glossary twice. But once I struggled through that, this got really good. In this book, we follow a character named Halen or Hal, and she really wants to go to this, essentially it's a university called St. Pendergast. In this university, they train gravers or spires. Gravers are a more academic student, and they learn how to raise these like undead monsters, very eldritch style horror monsters that are like fused together of human body parts. And spires are students that learn how to fight these monsters in these giant like arena spectacles, almost for sport. They're kind of like the star athletes of the school. Our main character wants to be a graver, but she does not have the aptitude for it. She's not very good at it. She really wants to do it, but she's actually more in tune to be a spire. So she does get an opportunity to go to this school, but to be a spire. But she also wants to be a graver, so she's going to try to do a little bit of both. There's a little bit of a like reluctant allies to lovers thing going on here, which I didn't mind. I thought it was fine. I did like the bickering back and forth though. I do think that there's witty banter here, which leads me to the discussion on the writing. A lot of people thought this was very dark, which it is. There's a lot of darker moments, and the monsters are also like super like gross and disgusting. So there's a kind of like gothic feel. Also, this bitch is snoring so loud. Anyways, there's a kind of like darkness to this book. I did see some reviewers say that the humor is a little too light for what this is. I thought that the humor was kind of like insult kind of humor. It's a little bit mean, so I think it kind of paired well with the story, but that's just like a personal thing. I don't know what kind of humor you like in your books, but I thought it went well with what the story was. But like I said, once we got to the university setting where it got a bit more academic, I had a lot of fun with this. It was just a really entertaining read. It wasn't perfect by any means, definitely not perfect by any means, but I was really into it. Seeing how this book ended, I don't know if I'll really love the next book. I am intrigued to read it though, because it did kind of go up in rating, as you can imagine. If Illumicrate did end up doing a special edition of the sequel, I don't know if I'll get it. I will borrow it from my library and see how I feel about it then. But if I read the sequel and I don't like it, then this will probably get unhauled, and it was fine for what it was. After that, I picked up Keeper of the Lost Cities Exile by Shannon Messenger. This is the second book in this series. I started rereading the series at the beginning of the year, and I've been using these books as kind of palette cleansers between some of my darker reads. This is a really lighthearted middle grade series that I think I read up to book 4 the last time I tried reading this, and so I'm going to catch up to the books that I have read and then eventually get to the books that I haven't read, and I'm really excited about that. I ended up giving this 4 stars. We follow a character named Sophie who's always felt like kind of an outcast, and then one day someone comes up to her and tells her that she's special, and then she gets whisked away to this fantasy world. The series isn't perfect, especially as you get a bit older. One thing that's pretty obvious in the story that I don't mind as much, because it's again a middle grade, is that some things do come a little bit easy to Sophie. She's kind of like OP sometimes. I don't mind it. I think this story really focuses on like character building, like being a good person, like good morals, things that children are starting to learn. I don't know, I have a good time reading this. It's fun, it's lighthearted. I think the series kind of fills that void of like wonder that you might have had when you were younger and you were reading fantasy for the first time. I haven't felt like that in quite some time, and I think this kind of fills that, just at least partially. After that, I read The Sun and the Starmaker by Rachel Griffin. I think this is also in a new releases vlog. I gave this one 3 stars. We follow a character named Aurora who lives in a village that doesn't get a lot of sunlight, and there's actually a really like cute, quaint little folktale at the beginning of this that explains why that is. Essentially, there was a giant earthquake and these mountains and these glaciers covered up the village and they got no sun. There's a character known as the Starmaker that is supposed to help bring the sun into the village. Like, he literally has to carry it to the village. And this is a job that they hold until they find the next Starmaker. So they could be the Starmaker for like 200, 300 years. Our main character, Aurora, meets the current Starmaker and he tells her that she is to be the next one. And that's kind of where the story starts. I thought this was okay. I didn't really feel a strong connection towards the characters, to the romance. I do think that the narrative, like the theme of it, was really beautiful and I like that part, which is why this is not getting like a low rating. It's a completely like fine 3-star read. I do think that this could have been better as something shorter, because there's a folktale at the center of this story, how the Starmaker was created, the relationship between the sun, who is like personified in this, and the Starmaker. I thought it was really beautiful and quaint, and there's a kind of parallel at the beginning, at the end, and the end with this like folktale. I think this could have been shorter. I think this could have been a cute like novella, since folktales are typically short to begin with. I think it could, if it could have been rewritten that way, I would have had a good time, because the middle part of this was just kind of dull for me. I think a lot of people would like this though. I don't think it's like horrible. I think it's just kind of like okay for me. Now we're getting into the books that I read for the magical readathon. The first was Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This was fantastic. This was phenomenal. I gave this 4.5 stars. This book follows our main character Claudia, whose best friend Monday goes and disappears one day. She doesn't know what happened to her. She's been asking around parents, family, teachers. No one knows what happened to Monday, and it seems that a lot of people don't really care or are giving too much attention to it. The story is definitely about how children kind of fall through the cracks and they suffer for it. This was very hard-hitting. I don't know why I put it off so long. I do really like hard-hitting YA contemporaries. I think I appreciate that realness, that rawness for an audience that doesn't really get the credit that they deserve. I think a lot of people want to shy away from tough subjects when it comes to younger readers, but if horrible things can happen to younger people, they should definitely at least have a place to read about it that's like age appropriate for them, you know? I've read from this author before and I haven't really loved their work in the past, but I did really enjoy this. This was so well done. I was very emotionally moved. I vlogged a little bit of this, like I said, with the magical readathon, and I cried a lot reading this. I am a bit of a crybaby though, so you know, whatever. I think my favorite part of this was seeing Claudia become her own person, despite the trauma that she's dealing with, becoming her own person, which I really appreciate those kind of like coming of age stories for younger readers. It's unfortunate it had to come about in this situation, but I thought it was fantastic. After that, I finished my favorite book of the month, which was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. I kind of gushed about this in that reading vlog. I gave this 4.5 stars. I thought about giving this 5 stars, but I just finished a 5-star read, and that kind of blows my feelings for this out of the water, but this is still really good. In this book, we follow a character named Gideon, and she's kind of like a servant to the Locked Tomb, also known as the Ninth House. I think the series kind of takes place like 9,000 years into the future. So the Ninth House is, I think it's Pluto. It's not explicitly stated, but I'm pretty sure it's Pluto. Our main character is trying to escape and get some freedom, but that doesn't work out. She's like tried to escape like 100 times or something ridiculous like that. But the Reverend daughter, who is like the heir to the Ninth House, basically forces Gideon to become her, I think it's called Cavalier, which is essentially like her swordsman, her protector, if you will. The Reverend daughter, Harrow, is a necromancer. This book is almost always described as lesbian necromancers in space. Gideon is not the necromancer. She is not a necromancer at all, but Harrow is. Harrow and Gideon have been summoned to the first house by like the necromancer prime emperor lord, or whatever his title is, and there's a bit of a competition element, and eventually there's a little bit of a murder mystery going on. If I had known that there was a murder mystery in this book, I would have picked it up sooner. I love a mystery. I love a murder. It's kind of like not closed door, but it's a very like small party mystery. I forgot what the proper term is, but there's only so many people that could have like committed the murder, and that's kind of our story. It's really fun. I really enjoy the wit of this. I really love Gideon. Gideon immediately became one of my favorite characters. I absolutely adore her. She's like low-key my type. The biggest critiques I hear about this is the writing, and I definitely see where people are coming from, because something about this book feels very modern. It feels very like of the moment when it comes to the writing, but like I said, it kind of takes place like 9,000 years into the future. There are references that feel very modern. At some point, Gideon does a that's what she said type joke, so I can see why some people did not mesh with the writing, but it works for me. And I definitely want to do a reread of this one, because there's some moments, especially towards the end, that I was kind of like, what's going on? Not because the author did anything bad, I'm just kind of slow when it comes to a lot of action. I don't follow action well personally, and there's a lot of action towards the end. But I had a good time reading this, and I already ordered the second book off of someone on Pango. After that, I finished my nonfiction of the month, which was the Bluestockings, A History of the First Women's Movement by Susannah Gibson. I gave this 4 stars. I'm still not super sure how to rate nonfiction, but when it comes to a 5-star nonfiction book, I guess I'll know it when I read it, you know, it'll be a vibe. This book follows a group of women known as the Bluestockings who lived in 18th century England, and they kind of created these salons that were supposed to be places for women to discuss the now, culture, politics, art, poetry, plays. Some of these women wrote and published nonfiction, everything, all the above, at a time when women being learned women was like frowned down upon. The only reason a lot of women could do this was because they were like upper class, and that's something that the author noted. There was one working class woman that we did follow, and her story like broke my heart. Yeah, this book kind of goes into how a lot of these women kind of juggled the expectations of women of that time period and wanting to be a bit more learned. You would think that a lot of them would be progressive, since a lot of them wanted to learn like Greek, Latin, learn more schooling, things like that. But a lot of them were still like conservative, Tory, very Christian. A lot of them were kind of like mean to each other when they broke societal norms, as if they weren't already all breaking societal norms. I liked some of the informational bits about this, but like I said, I don't know when to give a book 5 stars. I do think that this was like good overall. A lot of the chapters, some chapters I like more than others. I really like the ones about like motherhood and independence and love. But yeah, I think I got something out of this. Oh, the last chapter I really liked, the conclusion and pulling it all together. That was good too. After that, I read The Babysitter Lives by, oh, wrong one. After that, I read The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones. I gave this 3.5 stars. I thought this was fine. I've loved Stephen Graham Jones's work in the past. His Indian Lake trilogy is fantastic. Love that trilogy. This one I thought was just okay. This book is about a babysitter who is taking care of a pair of twins the day before Halloween. Weird stuff starts happening. It felt very like, let me see how many cliches I can put into a book and still make it like work, and I do think it worked. There's a little bit of ambiguity towards the end that didn't really work for me. I don't like ambiguity in a majority of my books. It doesn't always work well for me. The majority of time it does not work well for me. It still had that very Stephen Graham Jones writing that I like. I just think this book didn't really appeal to me in the way that his other stories have appealed to me. This was just like fine overall. It was probably like, I can see this being really, really good for other readers. It just wasn't for me, which is why I gave it 3.5 stars. And then I read my most disappointing read of the month, and that was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I gave this a kind of generous 3 stars. I think that's still like an okay rating. I don't think I could go lower, but 3 is fine as well. Our main character and her sisters are diviners, and people go to this cathedral where they live and they like pose a question towards them, and they have to do this ritual to get the answers, to get these like messages. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a really intense process where they have to like be drowned. It's like very harmful to them, but they have to do this for about 10 years, and then they're free. Like they can go on and live their lives. And for a lot of these women, that 10 year is almost up. However, the newly crowned king goes to the cathedral and wants to have his like future read, and he does not get a very good reading. I think he gets like 5 out of 5 bad omens. However, pretty soon after that, Sybil's sisters start to go missing, and that's where our story starts. I thought this was pretty mid. I thought the introduction to this world was really interesting. However, this author does this thing where they explain to you how the world works, but as the story progresses, you realize that what the characters have been told is a lie. And I'm not saying that the author is withholding things, like the discovery is part of the story. However, a majority of the time I do really like that in a story, but once we started learning the truth of this world, I got really bored. Like the truth ended up being super boring. Like it wasn't interesting anymore. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. Our main character goes on a quest, and that quest, we like bulldoze through that so quickly. I thought that this individual story could have been a duology. I do believe it is going to be a duology, but based off the ending of this book, I'm not super like keen to read the next book. I will if I'm like in the mood for it, but this itself could have been its own duology, and I think it would have been better that way. There's a little bit of a romance there between Sybil and some kind of like asshole knight, and I think that was fine. Some of the banter was a little too like on the nose and obvious for me. Overall, this was just like a mid read. I had high hopes because so many people talked highly about this. I thought the writing was gonna be the main problem, and it wasn't that bad. The pacing was just atrocious, and yeah, it just got really boring for me. So I gave it 3 stars. I sound like I'm really dogging this. Like, it's fine, it's not that bad, but I know people have different tastes, but I'm confused at why this got so much like rave reviews, but whatever. After that, I read my graphic novel of the month, which was Bitch Planet Volume 1 by Kelly Sue DeConnick. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. This is a kind of dystopian world where there's this institution, I forgot what the proper name is, but it's called Bitch Planet, like colloquially, and women are sent there when they commit crimes. It could be like legitimate crimes like theft or murder, but sometimes some of the crimes that they have listed are like not that deep. It's just kind of like being too sexual, whatever that means. And the women in this prison are asked to participate in some sort of sporting event. I forgot what the sport is called, but a sporting event for entertainment purposes. It's very similar to like the plot of The Longest Yard, that like football movie. I thought this was really fun and witty and gritty, and it touched on themes of like capitalism, misogyny, how desensitized people are to the suffering of others, or how we use other people's suffering for entertainment. A lot of these women are just like normal good women that are in bad situations and they get sent to Bitch Planet. I was sad to see that there's only like 3 volumes for this graphic novel series. I'm really excited to read the next one. We kind of jumped around a little bit in timeline, like we'll be in the present timeline, and then one volume will focus on a character's backstory, and I really like seeing that. This was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and I do want physical copies of this series. Their beautiful artwork wise is stunning. And finally, the last book that I read during the month of April was The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This was my classic of the month. I wasn't originally going to read this one for the magical readathon, but I was running out of time and I picked this up. I had a good time reading this. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, but that's because I listened to it on audiobook. The audiobook was good. I've just haven't been in a place for audiobooks recently. If I have headphones on, I want to be listening to music, so focusing on an audiobook at the moment is like not great for me, but I did manage to listen to this and I did enjoy it. It was performed by Brian Cox, the actor, and I do think that story lends itself well to being listened to on audiobook, since the majority of the story is the time traveler, who is never named, recounting his story to like a group of men. So it's very much like an oratory kind of experience. This is a classic. If you haven't heard about it, it's about a time traveler who builds a time machine and he goes into the future, like 800,000 years into the future, and meets what he believes are the descendants of the human race, like a different like human species. They're not humans anymore, but it's a different species, and he observes them and he makes like judgments about them, and he makes conclusions about them, and they change over time as he spends more time with them. It's kind of anthropological in a way, and he poses questions about like the purpose of like humanity, society, evolution. The first chapter is really fun because the time traveler is talking to a group of men about like the 4th dimension and theoretical physics, and I'm not even a physics person, but just the conversations about that were just really fun to like follow along with. I think if I read this physically again, I would have a higher rating. I just think that this book it lends itself well to like a discussion amongst friends, a book club, whoever you're reading it with. I saw some reviewers say that they read it like once a year because it's, you know, one of their favorite books. And philosophical discussions aside, it is like an adventure story. Like, he goes far into the future and he is like exploring what Earth looks like in 800,000 years, and he's meeting species or a different species of humans. The adventure is fun as well, and I think I would reread it at some point. Not now because I just finished reading it, but at some point in the future I could reread it. But that pretty much wraps up everything that I read during the month of April. I would like to hear what you read during the month of April. What were your favorite reads? What were your least favorite reads? I'd like to hear anything you have to say in the comments down below. I will also link my social medias down below, as well as some far more important links. Feel free to like, dislike, comment, or subscribe, or do neither. It's all cool with me. If you don't know what to say, you can just leave an emoji. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace. This is the loudest dog in existence.